The honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
Mr. Speaker, we know that the government has written letters to, for example, foster kids who graduated out of foster care during the pandemic. Were told by the provincial government in Manitoba, as an example, that they couldn't apply for social assistance in the summer of 2020, despite the fact there were no jobs. They had to apply for the CERB first. Of course, it was a no-fail policy, so they got the CERB. Now the government is asking for that back. Do they have a number on how much they intend to get back from low-income Canadians that received CERB payments in good faith? How much are they looking to save on the backs of those vulnerable Canadians?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Speaker, our record speaks for itself. We supported millions of Canadians during the pandemic. We are continuing to support Canadians in the hardest hit sectors as we come through this recovery period. And I might say to my honourable colleague, if he wants to make sure that some of the most vulnerable sectors and most vulnerable people are supported, I encourage him and his caucus members to support C2.
The honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
I encourage the minister to read his bill, because the fact of the matter is 900,000 people were kicked off the CERB in October with 2 days warning, and this bill won't do a thing for any of those people. In fact, when I asked him in opening the debate, Mr. Speaker, how many regions of the country and which regions of the country would be covered by the Canada Worker Lockdown benefit from October 23rd to the present day, the answer was none. And we haven't heard anything that would change our point of view about that. So I want to ask again, when it comes to low-income Canadians that the government is demanding repayment of CERB benefits from who don't have the money, how much are they actually anticipating they're going to get back?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a government that has always supported people, and I think our government has been very clear that as we get into what we hope is the final stages of this global pandemic, that now is the time to pull back on some of the benefits, some of the more generous benefits, because these once in 100-year investments in our economy were always intended to and always translated as exceptional measures for an exceptional time. And now that we're coming out of that time, Mr. Speaker, we are making these adjustments. We will always be there for people. That is the proof is in our investments in Canadians, and that's what we will continue to do.
Honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
When he says it's time to pull back on the benefits, is he referring to the clawbacks?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are talking about making sure that short-term measures are in place, like the lockdown, and should a jurisdiction in the country go into lockdown, Canadians will be able to access benefits.
Member for Elmwood Transcona.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think it's about time that we had a CERB low-income repayment amnesty in Canada, and that would do a lot to not leave those financially vulnerable people that I'm talking about behind. I want to ask, with respect to the 900,000 Canadians that were dropped like a brick from the CRB program with just 2 days' notice, what training resources does the government intend to provide in order to help them qualify for the jobs that are currently available in the market?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Speaker, our government has proven itself not only with investments during the pandemic, but also with retooling and reorganizing the entire way that we fund skills development in this country. The minister has been very clear on that, and so has our government.
The honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's no question that we have a labour shortage here in Canada, and yet we have a lot of workers who are seeking work and can't find jobs. 900,000 of them were on the CRB. What dollar amount is being requested here in order to provide training support so that they have the skills and education that employers are looking for to fill their positions?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the honourable member focusing on the issue of labour, because it allows me to remind all members that we have before this House a crucially important piece of legislation called Bill C2, and I would remind colleagues that C2 would extend the Canada Recovery Hiring Program until May 7, 2022 for eligible employers and increase the subsidy rate to 50%. In short, Mr. Chair, this benefit will be good for Canadians. We hope the opposition will support it.
The honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
Well, Mr. Speaker, employers can't hire workers that aren't qualified for the positions that they need to fill. So instead of just trying to starve those workers back to work when they don't have the qualifications, what is the government doing to support them to get the education and training they need to fill the jobs that are available in the market?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the honourable member's intervention. Let me just say that 106% of jobs lost during COVID have recovered. The economy is coming back, the fastest rebound of an economy after recession in Canada's history. The recovery is uneven. I know that from my file of tourism, but 106% of jobs recovered since the worst time of COVID, Mr. Speaker, says that people are getting back to work.
Honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
I see the government is reporting an increased expenditure for the caregiving benefit and the sickness benefit to the tune of about $2 billion. One of the things we heard at Finance Committee today was that actually the government isn't aware of which provinces have legislative plans to extend leave provisions in their provincial legislation so that workers under their jurisdiction can benefit from these extended programs. I'm wondering if the numbers here in the estimates reflect lapsed funding from delays in provincial leave extensions.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what's important to know about this particular matter is that we will be working with our provincial colleagues to clarify the matter. The supports are there, the program's in place, all Canadians will have access.
The Honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
Can the minister name the provinces that he's secured commitments from to take urgent legislative action to extend the leave provisions in their jurisdiction?
The Honourable Minister.
We continue to have those discussions with provinces, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
I heard that as a no, Mr. Speaker. I do want to ask, while I have the opportunity, the President of the Treasury Board about reforming the estimates process. We're here tonight talking about the estimates process. It's obviously one of the pillars of our Westminster parliamentary system is oversight by Parliament of government spending. We know there were some experiments in the Liberals' first years in government that led to quite a row in the House, actually, over a centralized vote. And I'm wondering if the President of the Treasury Board has any plans to improve the process that is now what it was prior to 2015, that I think there was widespread agreement among the parties and the pundits and others that it was a system that did not lend itself well to proper financial oversight.
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the honourable colleague for his question. As I'm a new president of the Treasury Board, I am currently working with the process that we have, and I always am looking for possibility of improvement, and maybe by a conversation with all of my colleagues, we can continue to make sure we have the best process for our government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Elmwood Transcona.
I know when we had some discussions about estimates reform in the 42nd Parliament, one of the ideas on the table was moving towards a fixed budget date. There seemed to be some interest from then Minister Bryson. I'm wondering if the minister now would consider moving towards having a fixed budget date.
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, as we know, we just went through a very difficult pandemic. I think that we need to look at how we will continue to support Canadians, how we are going to continue to bring our investments forward for Canadians, and we'll look at the process of our budget cycle as we go along. At this time, my honourable colleague knows, probably, we have the economic fall statement next week on the 14th, and after that, we will know what will be the next steps. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Elmwood Transcona.
One does wonder, listening to the government sometimes, whether we're getting past the pandemic or not. What we saw here was an all-party willingness to suspend some of the normal financial procedures when we were in the thick of the crisis. They're telling people who are on CRB, too bad, it's done, get back to work, whether they're qualified for the positions or not, or whether there's government assistance to help them get the training they need or not. Well, it's time for them to get back to work and to experience the accountability of Parliament. One way to do that would be to improve the estimates process, and one of the signature ways of doing that is to commit to a fixed budget date. We saw a suspension of some of the rules around the estimates that were mandated in a time of crisis. Surely Parliament would be willing to do that in respect to the budget, but in the meantime, I think Canadians have a right to expect regular reporting from their government on the budget. So, will she support a fixed budget date?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I would like to thank my honourable colleague for bringing forward an idea. We always want to improve our system. And at this time, we will have next week on the 14th, the economic outlook of our country. And we will look at how the next steps for investments for Canadians and our accountability, our transparency, as we continue to support Canadians through this pandemic that we are still in at this time.